This month I read 7 very different books. One of them I even contemplated not publicly putting on this list because it's embarrassing and it was so not my vibe. That one's the mystery book on the Kindle in the stack right here. But I'm gonna lump the first 2 together, and those were rereads of Legend and Prodigy by Marie Lu. I read these originally, I want to say 10 years ago, when I was probably like 12 or 13 in my post-Hunger Games dystopian trilogy era. I did not know, actually, until I was picking these back up, that Marie Lu wrote and released a 4th book that takes place years later, just in 2019. So I do look forward to continuing my reread of what is no longer actually a trilogy, because it actually now concludes in something new that I never read. But I was shocked by how much I didn't remember. I thought that like details would kind of come to me just like a little bit before they were revealed or whatnot from my memory, but that was not the case. I also cannot believe how young these main characters are. I guess at the point in which I read these for the first time, it was like around the same age. They were slightly older, so it was kind of like you look up to them and they're like daunting and they're whatever. But now that they are so significantly younger than I currently am, that was a weird thought to have while reading these books. Another observation too was, in a post-pandemic world, these go so much harder than they did the first time. That was pretty weird to draw similarities to as I read, because obviously I did not do that and come to the same kind of conclusions or have the thoughts or the recognition 10 years ago when I was just a kid reading these. But I would say they hold up. I'm excited to continue reading. I am going to do a buddy read of the 4th book, Rebel, with a friend, so I kind of slowed down and I did not start Champion this month. The next book that I read in February was Tales from the Cafe, which is the 2nd book in the Before the Coffee Gets Cold, also no longer a trilogy. There are 4 books now. I don't know if I'm going to read the 4th book because I have only heard bad things about it, that you should just read the first 3 that have been translated and then like let it be. So if you are an expert on that, please let me know, because I have a feeling I'm going to read the 3rd one and want to read the 4th one, but it might be like a curiosity killed the cat situation. I liked this one so much more than I did the first book. I kind of thought that this one wouldn't take us through all of the rules again, since we kind of rehashed them in each individual story. I mean, I was hopeful, I should have known better. And then I was a little bit tricked by the first story in this one, because it doesn't start off with the rules. You get going and then it kind of presents them as the characters living through them, and that was rough, and I was like, oh no, we have to do this all over again. But once I got through the first story in this one, the book just got better and better as I went through, which was not the case with the first one. I just had particular favorites, but stories 2 through 4 were probably my favorite, over even considering the other 4 in the first book. I think another thing that I've commonly heard from people on booktube who have read the Before the Coffee Gets Cold stories is that like the first book is good, but then the 2nd book is better, and then the 3rd book is better, and maybe that's why everybody was so disappointed in the 4th. I don't know. Once again, like quick read, super fast, and fun way to think about life and people's different circumstances and how normally people present when maybe they have the worst stuff going on. This book, my 4th book for February, I have been waiting to get to this one, because Alexandria Bellefleur is one of my favorite queer authors. Her stuff is so flowy and effortless and fun to read, exciting to read. She like hits the tropes, which I'm not a huge fan. I'm never looking for a specific trope in a book. It just either happens and I'm like here for it, or I am disgusted and I don't ever want to read it again. This one is pretty outrageous. It is about a girl who lies about dating a different girl, and then oops, guess what? Said girl that she lied about shows up to a family function, and now they have to pretend not only to be dating, but to be engaged. Within the first chapter, which I kid you not is 14 pages, you get all of that information, and it's kind of like the author is sitting you down and saying, buckle up, I know these are a little bit cringy, I know this is hard to believe, just here's the details, we're gonna suspend it, and you're gonna enjoy these two characters for the rest of this book, I promise you. Like, that's what that first chapter feels like, as chaotic and crazy as it is. But both of these main characters are so lovable. The main character, Tansy, who kind of looks like Anna Kendrick on this book cover, is a bookstore owner in Seattle. All of her books take place in the Pacific Northwest, by the way. That's another reason I really, really like her. So, bookstore owner, and then, like, nepo baby, supposed to inherit her family's newspaper publishing company. And this looks like the tall, pretty Colin from Twilight. So that's my gripe with this book, was the cover. Like, look at it. Those are those people. You can't tell me otherwise. And unfortunately, I did picture those people who are so vastly not these characters the entire time I was reading this book. But fake dating trope done very well, might I add, for somebody who hates fake dating tropes, because I find them hard to believe. But this one was fun. Next up, I read The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon by Stephen King. This is technically my first Stephen King book that I have actually finished. It is one of his smaller stories. It has been on my bookshelf for so long that I was like, either read it or acknowledge that you no longer have interest in it and unhaul it. I have really been watching Books Are Sick on TikTok and YouTube, and he is a huge Stephen King fan, and I think he's kind of like what made me think about this book sitting on my shelf. But it is about a little girl who gets lost in the woods on a hike with her family, and it is about the week of her being lost and kind of like getting through that time by imagining that Tom Gordon, her favorite Major League Baseball player, is like kind of coaching her along, giving her advice, but also just mostly like giving her something to think about. I would say this is not a very scary read. The first scene that is supposed to be frightening was the one that was the most frightening to me. Like, she trips and she falls on a snake, and that is my biggest fear. And so I kind of was like, oh boy, what are we about to get into? Everything else is kind of like survival fear, mental fear, isolation fear, but like, man, that snake scene, that made my skin crawl for sure. I really did enjoy this though, and I do want to read more Stephen King after this. I think I'm maybe in for a good surprise, because I do know that his stuff gets drastically longer the more you get into it, and I am intimidated by large books, so we're just gonna happily enjoy this one and see what comes next. But I'm not sure how I should further pursue the route of Stephen King. We are to the mystery book. This book was my book club pick. Well, not my pick, but it was the pick of the month for a book club that I am in. And if you watched my last monthly wrap-up video, the previous book club book was a Holocaust novel. So we did a real 180, and we went with a steamy, spicy romance. This book is called Pen Pal by J.T. Geissinger, and I didn't need this in my life. I did not need this in my life at all. I just knew going into this that it is not my jam. I am also not interested in men, and I would say a book with this cover is really, really reaching for people who enjoy men. So as a lesbian, the things that were supposed to hit did not hit. They did not land as intended with this book. It has crazy reviews. If you do go onto Storygraph, it'll be like 5 stars, this was amazing, these characters are gonna stay with me for the rest of my life. I pictured, and then like fan cast and everything. And then the next review you see will be like -5 stars, this book sucked, which is like, one thing I will say is I did underestimate the fact that there kind of would be a plot. I just thought it was going to be spice. So then when the plot plotted, I wasn't expecting it. I will say that. I don't think an unreliable narrator or main character justifies a plot twist. I don't think it explains it away. I think it is like a cheap way out. When that happens, I find it like to have been a waste of my time. I just need to move on. I just need to move on and just put this one down. The last book that I finished just in time for the end of the month is Hotel Magnifique by Emily J. Taylor. And this book is gorgeous. I picked it up purely because of the cover and the spine. I didn't know what it was about. I just, figured a hotel and probably some magical elements based on the cover. And this was kind of like reading Alice in Wonderland. There are a lot of really, really big scenes and visual elements that you are just constantly being told about. There are a lot of details in this book that strictly have to do with setting the scene, and that's not something I typically read or find myself reading, so I was thrown off guard by that, and it took a little bit of an adjustment. But then I kind of was able to, as a result of it, picture this grand hotel that moves from city to city every night and houses magicians and brings in guests, and you're kind of trying to figure out who runs the place and what their motives are behind it, and you're following a sister story. It's about the sister dynamic of the younger one excelling where the older one just tried to help them survive. And she's kind of grappling with the success of getting them to a place where they will be better off, but then also the jealousy of like, why couldn't my life have been as glamorous as being signed on to this place we've all dreamed about for years as a performer? Like, that would be so cool. I did think this main character was a little bit insufferable. She just kept making decisions where I'm like, you certainly cannot help your sister or anybody else if you're dead. There's a little tiny sprinkling of a romance throughout this, but I would not say it is the main point. But as of now, I do believe this is a standalone book. I did read in the acknowledgements when I finished that the author, Emily J. Taylor, used to be an art director. I don't know what for or where at, but that makes a lot of sense when you're reading this and you're thinking about the locations, the scenes, the art that's involved, and a lot of the items that the main characters are using to be magicians, basically. Last but not least, I will be starting March off with One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. And I don't know what to expect about this. I think it maybe will mirror my previous read a little bit, but it is a TikTok book, and I did not know this. I was gifted it, so I'm a little bit intimidated to know that it is book one in a series, because I just don't do well when entire series aren't out. Like, I would like to just binge the whole thing, waiting for the next book. It's not that it kills me, but it's that my little pea brain can never remember what happened, which is kind of partially why I'm making these videos, so that when I review One Dark Window in a monthly wrap-up, I can go back and review that when the second book comes out. Yeah, I'm starting March off with One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig.